Welcome back to another episode of the Compliance Chronicles. Again, we'd like to thank all our listeners, all our viewers for continue to follow us, and we're along this journey. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate the engagement. Over the last few weeks, actually, I've been around, and people have stopped me in the street actually saying that they've recognised me and they feel they don't know me. So that's a positive, I think.
Stopped you in the street?
Yeah, I got stopped in the street by somebody who was obviously in a compliance role in.
Was it your mum?
In an industry. Didn't have to go there. It was. No, but genuinely, we really appreciate the engagement. Really appreciate the fact people are taking time to listen, and give us some feedback on the content we're sharing.
You just on that. Does it bother you? You know, because I think I mentioned this when we were at a recent conference, that people did come up and say, "Oh, I watched the podcast, whatever, like Compliance Chronicles." Does it bother you that you've worked so long in your role? You're an expert in anti-money laundering, anti-financial crime, but now you're known as somebody that does a podcast as opposed to all of your experience and knowledge.
Again, I mean, at first it was a bit of a like, oh, I'm more than that, but I'm appreciative of what we've created, and it's like, a footballer, let's say, they might be known for the fact they're a footballer, but they're more than that. They're a father, they're a brother, they're a husband. So I think it's just, again, appreciating that, like, somebody I met for the first time said they felt like they knew me. They haven't met me before, but they felt like they knew me through the podcast, and they could relate to me and my character as a person. So at first it was a bit like, oh, I'm more than that, but I appreciate it for what it is, and hopefully that gives me the ability to impact more people, and actually to potentially create more relationships where I can actually, bring forward what my expertise are, or what I've garnered from my experience. So, yes, going back to the intro was just to say, yeah, look, we really appreciate if you would continue to like, comment, subscribe, and turn your notification bells on. Like, as a newish podcast now, we're not that new, but a newish podcast and growing podcast, that allows us to engage with more people and algorithms to work, to get our content out to a wider audience, which is what we're trying to do. So today we're going to be discussing training and development. Over the last 6 to 9 months, it's something that's been cropping up again more and more, and have conversations in the industries, working, and different conversations within compliance, and just generally speaking. And so I wanted to kind of, with you, Alex, go through, what are the best type, or how do we learn, or what's the best way to learn, should I say, and what is the best way to teach your teams?
Are you talking about compliance or in general?
I think in general, I think obviously we work in compliance. Obviously important that we touch upon that. But like I said, a really important thing for us is to know how people like to learn, or what the best way to teach people in general is, because one of the things we wanted to do as a podcast is to appeal to the wider community, wider society, outside of the guise of compliance or regulatory environment. So actually, we can foster a curiosity of the newer generation of kind of coming into employment. Actually, okay, this area of work or this industry might be of interest to me, and actually have an understanding of actually what appeals to them, and that might be also in how they like to be taught, and how they learn, and how we go about training them.
Yeah, okay. That's a tough first question. I would say that the best type of training needs to take into consideration what the actual learner wants to achieve or needs to achieve. I think specifically for compliance training, we're quite good at forcing training down people's throats. I think I discussed it on a previous episode. We do the same with like policies, procedures, and general documentation, is that we force it down people's throats. And I think it's the same with training. It's like, right, I'm going to deliver AML training and the whole business needs to attend. Why? Why does everyone need to attend? And you might argue with me in a second, but that's my perspective, is that we need to take into consideration a specific department, their role, and what do they need to know, and then cater the training around them, as opposed to, this is a legislation and regulation, and here's the training. So for me, the best type of training takes into consideration the actual individual and what they need to know.
Yeah,
You're going to argue with me now.
No,
I
no,
think.
no, no. Look, I think we might not be qualified to do much, but I think we could be qualified to speak about training and development, if not anything else. Um,
I was
and
actually going to do a sales pitch and say the best thing that they can do is sign up to AMLGS, but I won't do it.
No, look, and I think the why AMOGS training has been so successful and it's been so used is because it takes into consideration the blended learning methodology strategy. It doesn't just focus on one way of learning, because again, people learn in different ways, and I would say everybody needs to learn. So to say that everyone needs to just to go to an AFC an AML training is not dealing with the fundamental aspect of actually everybody needs to learn about AML. It's just how they do it. So I don't think everyone needs to learn or go on the same course, but everyone needs to go on a course that teaches them how AML or anti-financial crime or terrorist financing or proliferation financing or safer gambling impacts them and impacts their role.
But what if it's so within a gambling business? Do you think that everybody within a gambling organization, then, because we'll focus on gambling for now, do you think everybody should have some level of AFC AML training?
I do.
But do you think everybody should have some level of AML training?
Yes.
But why?
Because it impacts all aspects of the business. So it will impact the CS, impact customer service. It'll impact them the same way it impacts the MLRO, just in a different way and at a different time. So the really, really important thing is to have an awareness of all the things that are impacting you and that impacting the business that you're contributing to, whether you are doing it, whether you're doing it, whether you're doing it passively or actively. So from somebody in CS who's passively involved in protecting or preventing financial crime taking place, it's important that they know what that potentially looks like, so that again, when they are just doing their role, they're understanding that they are impacting on how that looks like. Because if they don't know that, then they cannot contribute, whether it is again passively, because something might be said by a customer, for example, and if there's no awareness of what that looks like, oh, why are you using 5 payment methods? Oh, just because I don't know, I don't like to deposit more than £100 in each payment method, because they go do customer due diligence on me, and I don't want that to go to take place. If someone doesn't know what customer due diligence means, like a CS agent, they won't see it as potential red flag or concern or consideration. But if they have a bit of an awareness of what that is, they can say, actually, hold on a second, that's not the greatest of explanations.
But then is there a risk of you then teaching criminality? Sorry, that sounds really bad. For example, you've got somebody in a department, so not customer service, but maybe customer service, but a department that doesn't really have so you're saying every department, but let's say, for example, human resources. I'm probably wrong here, but I'm just picking one out. But let's say human resources, they don't need to know about anti-money laundering specifically. In the training that you deliver to human resources, you teach them about things that they need to look out for, right? But if they don't already have that knowledge, have you then inadvertently taught them how to smurf money? Have you taught them how to layer money because you're teaching them what to look out for? They didn't even know about this, but now they know.
No, because if somebody is criminally minded and somebody wants to be a criminal, they'll teach them. I wouldn't be teaching them. They'll really know. So I don't think somebody will learn something and say, oh, actually, now I want to become a criminal. I think it's otherwise there will be no learning that takes place.
But maybe not them. Maybe now that knowledge is in their head, and next time they're with a friend, and the friend says, I'm every time I deposit £1,000 in my bank, it gets held for ages, and then she goes, actually, you know why that is? It's because of this. They're trying to prevent you from smurfing your money. Just do £950 every time. She doesn't know that guy's a criminal. All of a sudden, she's got this knowledge, and she's helped that person. He has helped that person.
But that's a risk of learning anything. It's like saying, well, an electrician that learns how to wire things, he can tell somebody how to get the wiring to circumvent somewhere to save money on electricity. It's like it can happen in any realm, and I think that is the least worry. That should be the least of worry, as long as the way you're communicating it, and teaching and providing that educational piece goes beyond just like this is what you need to look out for, but also safeguards like this is why we're doing it. So you're learning about this so you can protect the business, yourself, wider society. And what does that look like? That looks like potentially saving somebody in your family's life. And then that means that person has a more of a vested interest in actually learning, number one, and actually safeguarding those I guess typologies within a controlled environment, rather than telling everybody, all their friends, yeah, this is what money laundering looks like, and this is how you get around it. And ultimately, there should be other controls within that as well. So if somebody does that, let's say it's £1,000 per transaction, does CDD. If somebody does it 950 4 times in a row, that should still trigger something within the internal controls of an organisation. You would hope.
Depends on your risk appetite.
Yeah, but I think like there's a saying that I found actually, which is from Henry Ford. Going back to the training piece, because I believe that the training piece is something that has been. We're in a kind of transition period now where I feel training is at a crossroads of actually effectiveness. You had kind of a lot of the training delivered like face to face, and then we've kind of moved to that online training, e-learning training. But we have advancements in technology. We have advancements in the ease of and access of information, which actually might be reducing the effectiveness of learning. We're at that crossroads now, I believe, where a lot of companies are kind of just like, okay, well, we'll just get a process in place and just get people to adhere to it, and they can learn along the way, which is okay. But there needs to be kind of structure and investment in it. And some people might feel like, well, if we invest in learning, we're going to lose anyway when the person leaves. But then going back to the quote from Henry Ford, he said, the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay.
Yeah, I like that.
So I think a lot of the time we look at potentially training somebody as a sunk cost. It's a development on them, and if they leave, that goes with them. But actually, it's even worse to have somebody that you staying in the business and not trained. They're more of a risk. They're more of a burden. They're more of a liability than somebody who's trained and potentially might go. And on top of that, the more you invest, there's another stat actually here which I had.
Just to make it prepared.
Yep, came prepared. So, right, where is the stat gone? Here we go. Where is the stat? Here. Where's the stat? It's gone. The stat was, there we go. Here we go. It was a LinkedIn workplace report from 2024, and it said that this is how high the percentage was of respondents that responded in such a way. 94% of employees said they would stay longer at a company if it invested in relevant training. So actually, it's a double positive, should I say. One, you are reducing the risk of that person being a liability to your business. You're providing, you're creating a better qualified, a better educated workforce, and actually you're reducing turnover by investing in them, because that will give again that employee more of an appetite, more of a reason to stay in a company. So,
but do you think the lack of training of staff is down to a lack of investment by the company or a lack of investment in time by the employee?
I think I think it starts the tone starts from the top. So whether it's the company, whether it's the head of department, whether it's the team lead, there has to be an investment in providing the environment that each and every person has the time. So whether it's that saying, well, 1 hour a month, whether it's from the top, whether it's from the manager, 1 hour a month, 2 hours a month, you have to do some sort of training, or you have to do some sort of learning for yourself, or we provide you the learning. That provides time, and then that holds the person who then has to become accountable and to be able to actually do the learning do the learning that's provided to them, or find ways to learn for themselves.
But I think I don't have an answer to this statement I'm going to make, but at a company I worked with in the past, they had a really good training budget. I believe it was a good training budget. I think it was something like you could undertake training, partake in training with a cost of up to £3,000 a year. So that was your individual budget that was given to you. Only 22% of employees used that budget. used any of it. So only 22% of employees across this company, which had about 1,000 employees, if I remember correctly, only 22% of them accepted any of the budget. So that's £100 course all the way up to a £3,000 course.
Did everyone know they had that? But
Everyone knew it. It's part of their onboarding, and they're sent reminders I think it was every quarter that, don't forget, you've got access to this training budget. But only 22% of them done it. And the reason for it, when I spoke to members of the compliance team, why they're not doing it, was time. Was, if I invest time to do this training course, I'm going to be behind on how many customer accounts get reviewed. I'm going to be behind on whatever it is. And I can't really make up that time. And I'm not going to be given overtime, for example. So they saw it as more of a burden as opposed to a benefit or a privilege. And I think that's the problem with training for the most part, is that training is seen as an administrative task more than a developmental task. Yeah.
Is that because the majority of training is still seen as a tick box exercise?
100%. That's what it is. Because it's very hard now, in my opinion, to find training that benefits your development more than learning on the job. I think it's very hard to find training that can compete with that, or at least give you something that is close to that learning outcome. Like if you spent 3 months on a job, for example, you would gain a lot more knowledge and skills than you would 3 months on various training courses, in my opinion. So I think that is part of it, is that they see it as, well, if I just do the job, I'm gonna learn and I'm gonna develop. What is a training course going to teach me?
So we're saying there's no training that can teach somebody, as opposed to them doing the job themselves, or what are you saying?
So in my opinion is, if somebody come to me now and said, Alex, I want to learn to be an MLRO.
Yeah.
What would you recommend? I would say spend a couple of months with Ray, Shadow Ray. I wouldn't say go and do this course. I would say spend a couple of, or I'd pitch a course that you do, but I would say spend a couple of months with Ray. If somebody said to me, Alex, I'm thinking of doing a transition over to safer gambling, I really want to learn the ins and outs of how it works, I would say, great. There's a guy called Thomas Ferns, spend a couple of months with him and learn that. For me, they'll gain more and be better at the end of it than they would if they were to go and attend a training course.
But that is still trade, because they're not doing. They're almost either mentorship, or they're being taught in a scenario-based environment. So it's like you have the person, Ray or Tom or whoever else it may be, Joe Bloggs, where that person is going to learn from somebody else. So it's not their own experience. They're not.
No, but working with you. Yeah. So working with you, them shadowing you shadowing them. So them doing the job, but in an environment where you are, and the same way, like using Thomas as an example, but I feel that they'll learn more from being around people, doing the job, making mistakes, and having somebody with them than they would if I was to send them on, I don't know, a course that's an 8-week diploma for something. That's my view.
What about if it was the likes of X and said person creating the content for?
Then that's fine again to a certain extent. But I think, I think of example of where I've learned the most, and I think, a perfect example, right? We went on our covert courses, right, to become undercover officers. There was very rarely anything I learned from being in the classroom when they would teach you, this is the type of drug, this is the type of typology to use and terminology to use when you go and make a purchase. There was very little I learned in the classroom. But then when you got sent out to go and do a test purchase, for example, or you went on a course where it was a real life scenario, I learned tons from that, because it was real, as opposed to, and I was watching the other guys, what did they get wrong, what did they do well, taking that from them and then making my own mistakes, and it turned out well. But when I went back into the classroom again, I was sat there twiddling my thumbs thinking, well, it's great, but because now I need to know the laws that govern the actions I'm taking, but it's not helping me with actually taking the action.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think there's a place for everything. I think there's a place for your online based learning. I would say learning, but it's more of a. I think it should be more seen as like an assessment of learning outcomes.
What do you mean by e-learning?
Yeah, so
You think there's a place for it?
I think there's a place for it. I think the place for e-learning in this day and age definitely is to be used as a tool to assess learning outcomes from other types of learning. So you might do a workshop, for example. You might do, scenario based questions, and then as a consequence, there'll be an e-learning where that is actually assessing the learning outcomes. I think that's where it is, rather than being used to facilitate learning in and of itself. To say, okay, somebody does e-learning, and from that we believe they're going to have the knowledge to go away and do the work.
Oh yeah, so e-learning as a facilitator.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Yeah, like I do e-learning on almost some form of e-learning on a monthly basis. I will do some form of e-learning. But actually, I stand corrected. Within e-learning, would you categorize listening as e-learning? So I watch e-learning videos, for example, where someone will talk through, I don't know, similar to a podcast, they'll talk through AFC trends and techniques that are happening, in the last 6 months, and I'll have it on in the background while I'm working. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into that actually after we just have a few more questions. But I'm going to go into kind of different types of learning, and they have that. There's a thing I discovered a couple of years ago, just in terms of developing myself and training around learning, and this was presented in one of the kind of training courses. So I went on I went on a training course to be a trainer. So it's quite ironic. So I went on a training course to be able to deliver training in the most efficient, best way, whatever. And one of them, the points that was within that course was the pyramid of learning or pyramid of retention, and kind of the ways to engage delegates, what do you call it, trainees, or people on the course, and which ways of teaching would garner the most retention of the information. So I'll go through that in a second. But the question then is, why do you think so many companies are failing when it comes to effective training then, or effectively training their staff?
Excuse me. Why do I think so many companies are failing? I think it's
To effectively train their staff.
Yeah, I think. I mean, number one, I would say is because generally staff aren't provided enough time, like enough of a cushion. For example, I want you to complete 50 hours of continuous professional development every year, for example. 50 hours doesn't sound like a lot, but when you break it down per month, per week, actually that is a lot of time that member of staff has to take away from their day job. So I would say number one is because businesses need to provide that allocation to them and make sure that if they do it in their personal time, obviously you don't want them to do it, but if they do it in their personal time because they can't, fall out of sync with their workload, that they're given time off in lieu, or they're compensated
They're reimbursed
somehow.
in some way.
Yeah.
The time's reimbursed.
So I would say number one is that people just don't have time to do it because it's not a priority. And we one of our first episodes where we had Jacob on, and we discussed, he was talking about the training that staff have, and I said, well, it sounds like, because he said, if they don't attend the training, they go down a disciplinary route. I said, well, you're forcing them to do training. I wouldn't do that. So I would say number one is the time allocation, and number two is incentivizing them. What do they get as employees from attending that training? I'm not saying go and attend this course and his $5,000, but definitely, people attend the course. The top 5 marks on that course receive some sort of award. Somebody continuously investing in themselves to develop should be portrayed by the company and shouted about, like, this person has completed X amount of hours, where we don't do that enough.
Yeah. My mum always said to me when I grew up that you make time for what is a priority. And I think there's no other way in a company showing that training and development is a priority than allocating time for staff. And that, again, it comes down from the business all the way to the leaders, a department leader or an area leader. Like I said, for me, working in department, leading departments, every call I'm having with somebody, whether it's a one-to-one or general call, is where is your time? Like if I'm saying it's a bit 1 hour, wherever in this task or wherever is this schedule that you've got, is there time for you to do training development? If there's not, I will do my utmost to work with that person or that group to have time in there. So one of the things again we created in the organization I worked with previously was a monthly um, group discussion, and so I'll go into it in the pyramid of retention, but is I cut out I created some space for everyone to have be in an hour call where they're teaching each other, so they're learning through teaching others, and there's always been a lot of tasks. There were always a lot of tasks. There's a lot of kind of tight deadlines, at times even backlogs. But the priority was developing, because when you develop yourself, you can develop others. You can find better ways of doing things, and then as me as a leader, I can have confidence in delegating to people. And then tasks, when you can delegate to more people, then the tasks can get done more efficiently, and hopefully then you find your efficiency savings in things. So I think you make time for what is a priority, and I think that's what organizations need to show more, and that's probably why they're failing. That, and also the measuring of effectiveness, that you have this kind of like mandatory training, and I think that me personally, I don't think mandatory training will ever facilitate true learning, because you're mandating it on somebody. You're not giving them the reason, other than if you don't do it, it's you might have some sort of repercussions.
So then how would you change that? If there is a course right now, for example, everybody in the office has to undertake a health and safety course. It's mandatory. How do you mandate it without mandating it? How
Yeah,
do you get around that?
I guess I think it's a wording. I think it's a wording thing. It should be mandatory in the sense that you need to do this in order to be safeguarding yourself or safeguarding your colleagues. But again, it's wording why someone needs to do it. So it's like a colleague safeguarding training, for example. I don't know, and it has to be done by this date. Why? Because there's a risk that there might be a fire. There's a risk that if you don't do this training, you know somebody might come in and slip and then fall. I think it needs to be explained better than, like, same way compliance is a bad. It's not. It's a negative. Has a negative connotation. I think, man, when you say something's mandatory, it doesn't incentivize. It doesn't give anybody.
Yeah, but you can change the wording
Yeah.
and it still be mandatory. Like if you change the wording and say attend this course because it's good for the business, but if you don't do it by X date,
Yeah, and I think, but again, it goes hand. I think mandatory training is tick box. I don't think there's many, if any, at all mandatory training. Definitely from like a e-learning perspective, that is a genuine learning vehicle. It
What
might
about
be
your AML training?
my MO training is it's mandatory, but it's never advertised as mandatory training. And you've never ever seen me with a workshop or training session that says mandatory training. It's always like a workshop or an awareness session, and it's always delivering again to the business area. So it might be the risk team, or it might be the product team.
So if it's not
Why?
mandatory, what happens if I don't attend? What if I don't do it this year? If I don't do my AML refresher?
Again, that's
I'm
that.
putting you on a spot.
Yeah, no, it's a conversation for. So I will take it up with a business area. So if you don't do it, okay, if you're person in a team, I'll take it up with your manager. This person hasn't done their training in the specified time. Do you realize the impact of them not doing it?
But is there a consequence? Like, other than the fact they're not trained, is there a consequence for that member of staff or that team if X amount of people don't attend their training?
There's a consequence on the business. So if the
But
training,
for that person, like for example, I don't know, disciplinary route or lack of salary increase, etc. Is there a consequence for it?
me personally, I've never enforced disciplinary action on like something's mandatory at AML financial crime training. I've never imposed it. But what I will always do is I will make the business, either the manager or the business, aware of the training, lack of training, and the implications of the fact that the training hasn't been undertaken. And it's up to the business to decide how best to go about it. I'm sure there are organisations who do that, but again, it's that carrot and a stick, right? It's that you can either mandate and then have the stick, or if you don't do it, trouble. Or you can have the carrot, was like, well, anybody who does their mandatory training within X period of time, it will be counted towards the the end of year appraisal
Okay. Yeah,
as a positive.
that makes
You've
sense.
just literally changed then a little, just changed the whole dynamic of the mandatory training just by dangling a carrot instead of a stick.
The Compliance Chronicles continues to grow and reach new audiences. We're very thankful for the likes, comments, the new subscribers. We'd like to reach a wider audience, so please don't forget to share and to continue following and turn on your notifications. Yeah, yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
So then, in terms of the types of learning, so face to face, e-learning, workshops, attending conferences, what else is there? On the job learning. What do you think? What's the best?
Perfect. Thank you. You segued straight into what I wanted to discuss. And I've learned this over time.
The
Like I
book's
said,
open, so you've got
yeah,
a
I
quote
learned
or a
this over
stat
time,
ready.
and it was again going through that transitional period around COVID, where a lot of things that I was delivering had moved from your in person workshops, your face to face sessions to kind of your online, and really trying to understand actually how best was would people learn. And then it was delivered in that session we were talking about earlier, and it's the pyramid of learning, the retention. So I'll go through the different types of learning. You mentioned a few, and how much typically is retained by the, how do you say it, the delegate or the person who's attending that session. So you have lecture, so somebody being spoken at, not spoken to, spoken at. So spoken at is like just delivering without kind of that two-way feedback. Like a presentation where somebody's just reading off the
Like at uni,
yeah,
basically.
off the screen and not really providing context. So that's 5%. So typically people retain 5% of that information, and then you have reading. So when you read something for yourself, typically that's you retain 10% of the information. We went to kind of what you spoke about before, like audio or visual listening or watching something. That's typically 20% retention. So people retain 20% of that information that they've seen or heard. Then you go to demonstration. So something being demonstrated to you. So that's the difference I believe between being spoken to and spoken at. Spoken to is that you speak to somebody and then you demonstrate. You go beyond the contextualize, and that takes people from 5% retention to 30% retention of information. Then you have group discussions, which I actually typically, which I really love. I just like to see people engaging and discussing things, coming up with ideas. That is 50%. 50%. You're a big jump there. You have 50% of that information that you discuss in a group setting retained. Then you have practical by doing, which is what you mentioned as well, which is actually by doing something, by thrusting yourself into the experience, you're likely to retain a lot of more of what you learn, and that's 75%. And then the one that I'm encouraging more and more, which is combining with group sessions, is when you teaching others, when you teach others, when you're teaching others something, actually what you learn 95% of what you're teaching, because you have to learn it in order to be able to present it and teach it. So what I've been trying to
Shouldn't
do,
you know 100% before you start teaching something?
so you retain. So if you're teaching others things, you retain 95% of the information that you've taught. That makes sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
How can you retain 90? If I'm teaching you something, so you're saying that there are cases where people teach something and they don't know it themselves?
Yeah, I think if you're teaching something, you're always going to learn. So I think it's more the retention of the thing. So when you're,
No, I agree that you're always going to learn. I get that,
yeah,
but I don't understand the stat of. Maybe it's just me.
yeah,
If I'm teaching you something, I'm going to retain 95% of information. I should already have it retained because I'm teaching it.
no, because retention is different. Retention is remembering, learning is knowledge. So I think it's different. I think it's different. I think
Okay.
you can never know 100% of what you teach. I don't think.
I
I don't
don't know.
believe. I don't think,
I
because
don't know.
there's context. There's always context. So for example, um, I might say teach something and say when you see this, do this, and somebody says, hold on a second, but I've seen X or Y take place in my company. It might be the first time you've ever heard of that. Then you're learning.
No, I get that, but that's not you retaining information that you've taught. That's you retaining information that you've just received. That's very different. That person's come back to you and said, "Oh, I do it a different way,"
Yeah.
and you think, "Yeah,
No,
that's good. I've learned that."
by having to teach others. So my point is, by having to teach others, you then retain 95% of that information that you've absorbed. So you learn through teaching. So
I think it's me. I'm not. I'm not.
let me give you an example. I set a group discussion for a team, compliance team, and say the topic of today that I want to be discussed is proliferation financing. And through this discussion, I'm going to make you, Alex, the chair. I want you to go away between now and next week and have to teach your colleagues in this discussion what proliferation financing, what the key risks are, what dual use goods means, how it impacts different industries. I want you to deliver that to your team. But having to deliver that to your team, you've gone from just the 10% is it reading, so you've gone from like the 10% just by reading it and not having to deliver it to 95% retention because you have to teach others about.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense.
Does it make more sense?
It makes more sense. I'm still not 100% certain, but we'll move on out of fear that I'm looking like a complete idiot by not grasping.
Maybe I'm just looking like an idiot because I'm just not explaining it well enough.
No, I'm pretty sure it's me. I'll have to. So, but then on the early ones where you said when people read something it's 20%. Was it
10%?
It's 10%. But is that because? So what was the 20%? Was that the audio?
20% was audio visual, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But for me, I retain 20%, I would say. I would agree with that stat, sometimes even less. But that's normally because what I'm listening to or what I'm watching, 80% of it is essentially garbage. I'm retaining the 20% because out of what actually is being given to me, only 20% of that is real value. So how much of those stats are based on the value of what's being delivered as opposed to what's
that's a good
being
question.
retained?
I don't know if you're that's a good question. And I would say, I'm not a clinical specialist. I'm not a neuroscientist. But I would say I don't know if your brain can do that in the moment. Decide this is of value and this will guide everything. I think everything will go in, and out of that, 20% will be retained. And
Nah, we do decide that. Like if you're in a conversation with someone, you know straight away whether you're disinterested. Your brain tells you.
Yeah,
this is...
but the information will still come to you, and even though you're disinterested, you'll still remember.
Okay.
You will still retain, or there will be a learning of 20% of what's said. So what I agree, what might happen, it might then dilute the value of what you're learning. So out of that 100%, if only 20% is of value, now you might only retain 8% or 10% of actually core information because it's diluted with irrelevant.
So are you saying then with this podcast we need to focus on just 20% of good content because the other 80% is going to get disregarded anyway?
Well, maybe not. No, I think what we deliver here is both audio visual, but again it's discussion. So we're kind of having a discussion. There's discussion where people will hopefully be engaged from their living room or in their cars or in their offices or wherever, walking down the road. And in that discussion that we're having right now, somebody's probably hopefully going away and thinking, actually, in my company, I'm going to have to review actually what the best way of actually delivering training is. And that's not just come from them hearing, but it's coming from us discussing actually these points.
Yeah, but I still think that, from people listening to the podcast, out of a whole episode, there probably is only 10-20% of that somebody will go away and go, okay, let me learn from that. But I'm happy with that. I don't mind that. Well, I'm not expecting we're not batting 1,000 every single time. We know that we're going to get some wrong, or people aren't going to be interested in every single minute of our discussions. But I'm happy with 10-20%.
It's not a training where ultimately it's not a training course, right?
So, in terms of learning development, then we've spoken about what we find effective when we deliver it. How do you learn? What's the best way you take in information?
Good question. For me, the best way that I learn is definitely around teaching others. I would think teaching others has taught me that I've learned the most from teaching others. I think that, and also group discussion. I think those two have taught me the most. I think that's, again, we're all individuals. Some people might learn better, but I think as a general rule of thumb, this is the way people retain information is just cognitive. And like there's the stat from last year, which is again we have to kind of consider this. I will discuss it. I was going to discuss it, but we have to consider kind of the evolution of society. So in 2024, there was a study done on the focus on how long people focus for. So on average, people are able to focus for on average of 8.25 seconds now, compared to 2001 when it was 12 seconds. So there's almost a third less, almost a third less of focusability in human beings. So if you're just delivering something which is e-learning or of audiovisual with no change of tone or dynamic that is allowing people to be engaged, or two-way communication where that somebody might be disengaged but you're able to ask a question in that engagement, you're going to lose a lot of the ability for somebody to kind of learn and retain what they're seeing, listening, or
So is that why when we deliver training or you deliver training, you always make it interactive?
Yeah.
For that reason, for focus to maintain.
Yeah, for multiple reasons. One, I want to deliver a session or training that is able to provide learning outcomes to those who are on the course. So at all times, I want the engagement to understand actually is this delivering outcomes to people? When they ask questions, it allows me to say to them, okay, next time, or even in this session, I need to explain something a bit more. And then again, it helps again to create participation. So more people involved, more discussions. Not only is it now a presentation. Let's say this is an online course. It's not only now a presentation. It's not only now audio visual, but it's in trying to blend as many types of learning within one environment. So we have the presentation on the screen, pictures, whatever, images. You have the audio visual, there might be videos, and then you have the group discussions where people are participating, and in that participation hoping to increase percentage of retention for everybody who learns in a different way. So that's, it's like a variance of reasons, but that's definitely one, and obviously focus as well, making sure not everyone's sleeping.
Yeah, but I think that's even the same with even when you get into group discussions, because for the most part it's remote now for most businesses. You're not always in a room with each other, that you can see people doing other tasks in a group discussion. So that probably impacts retention as well. The fact that, even when you go to round tables or you go to in-person conferences, for example, because people are distracted by their phones because they've got work messages or personal messages coming through, I think it impacts retention. So on that point, do you think there is value in putting a hard stop to when somebody attends a training course, leave your phone at the door, no distractions? Do you think there's value in that?
There could be value in that, but again, you don't want to create friction in the learning environment. You want people to be open and conducive to wanting to learn. So anything that could create friction, I try to avoid. So what I would say is, for example, I will never say don't leave your phones at the door. I would say this is an environment where you get as much out as what you put in. The more you put into this into this session, the more you're going to get out of it. And let's say it's a virtual one. I would say for the intro and for when we're kind of introducing one another, that I want the screens to be on for a period of time. But after a while, it's up to you if you want to turn the screens off. But again, I will encourage people to really be invested, because this is your time, and you want to make sure that you, in this time that you're using, you're getting as much out of it, for not only for yourself, but actually for the teams around you, because the more you get, the more you can then positively impact your colleagues and your team. So that's how I try to do it, and then from there, hopefully, there's less desire to kind of go on their phones and be distracted.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to the leaders and the teams. If people are doing other tasks, it goes back into leaders and the teams where they're like, listen, guys, if you're on this course, I don't want you to work. I don't want you to, this is your time to learn. So really, again, the leadership is also taking ownership of actually making sure people aren't feeling that they need to be dual focused in actually learning and actually still working this, and because it is working, but working on another task at the same time.
So somebody listening to this then that wants to be able to enhance their career or enhance their knowledge, what can they take away in terms of what should they go and do now to adapt their approach to personal development?
So I would say the number one thing to improve your knowledge is to teach others. So get to yourself into a position where you can teach others whatever it may be. So you might want to learn coding. So okay, go away and research enough coding that you can go deliver that what needs to be done to code X or Y to your 10-year-old son or your 12-year-old son. By doing that, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to absorb information beyond remembering. So I always say there's a key difference between remembering something and learning something. And you need to be able to have the learning, which is contextual, rather than the memory, which is just a kind of, it is the ability to acquire information and retain it and then reuse it.
So what is the difference?
So I liken, so when you remember something, it's the process of just acquiring information, storing it, and having the ability to retrieve it. It's not contextual. So often not, if there's a different context, you're not able to apply that in a different context. Whereas learning something is acquired knowledge, and you're able to apply that across different contexts, regardless of whether it's a similar context to where you first absorbed, or the first environment that you absorbed that information. Like the example you're given when you were taught or when you remembered it. So I had an example here. So it's like they did a study in 2025 of ESL, so it's English as a second language. They get study of two groups learning English, and then they put one into more memorized memory technique of learning, and one into more contextual technique of learning. And whilst they both had benefits and they did both learn, the one where there was contextual learning yielded a much better long-term ability for somebody to use the language, and a much better ability to use the vocabulary they learn meaningfully. So, for example, if somebody says "Hi, good day to you," and then it's the same kind of way you memorize it. If someone says it in a difficult context or in a group environment, they're able to contextualize it and put it in different scenarios rather than kind of just being able to use it for in the same way they've learned it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense, and I think it does make sense. You got there eventually.
Yeah.
But one thing that really bugs me is with regulators, they insist on seeing evidence of training.
Yeah.
And that really bugs me, because regulators want to see evidence of training, but us as operators or businesses want to see evidence of learning. And they're not the same thing. But the regulators will always say, show us your training records. But actually, just because Ray hasn't been on a course this year, are you trying to say that we should bring into question his AFC knowledge because he hasn't been on a course this year? And that really bugs me, that regulators push for that all the time. And don't get me wrong, I, as somebody who works within a regulated business, will tick that box. I will make sure that training is completed so that it can be evidence to a regulator. But I'm more focused on the other side of it, which is I don't care too much about the training that ticks boxes. I care more about, like what you said, the learning outcomes. But that's one thing that really bugs me.
Yeah.
Is they always ask for evidence of training, but not the evidence of learning. And that's frustration.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. It's a really good point you mentioned. But then when you're confident, I think when you're able to demonstrate the learning, you can challenge that piece a bit better. The issues where it hasn't been training and it also hasn't been learning. If you can evidence the learning and say, look, this person Ray hasn't been on this course, a accredited course or a whatever kind of course they would want to see in a tick box this year. But I can tell you what he's done to learn about the risks of AMR, what he's learned about proliferation finance this year. He's done X, Y, and Z. He presented to his team. He's delivered this to the department. He's done this right up to the board. I think that you can argue that. No, I don't think you can argue. I think it's clearly a better.
But would they accept that, the average regulator?
I think the more you can evidence that, I think there has to be an acceptance. I think there has to be an acceptance.
I mean, I think so, and I would always argue it, because I think that the average person doesn't learn from slides; they learn from stories and mistakes, and I think that's why your like I still sit into your training to this day because I like the interactiveness, because you'll give an example or a story of a scenario, something that you've been through, but then you open it up to the floor and then somebody else gives an example from their experience, and then I go away and I've learned something new. So I don't like the tick box approach, because I think that you learn more from stories and mistakes than you do from slides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I call scenarios and case studies or scenario based kind of learning or training controlled doing on the job training. I try to create as many real life scenarios that I've experienced, things that I know that the person might experience in doing that job, and create the scenario in the training, and then pose the question.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it was that said it. I don't know if it was you. Somebody said something to me. It was years ago. It might have been an old boss. They said, tick box training gets you through an audit. Culture training gets you through a crisis. And that was really good. I like that.
It wasn't me. I can't claim it.
You should have just said, yeah.
I should have said it was me, shouldn't I? Yeah.
And I think that is one of the best statements, because coming back to the point of sending people on courses or getting people to sign up to e-learning, I think that is great. It ticks a box to a certain extent, and there may be some learning outcomes, but what you do day to day and the culture within the business, the conversations that take place day to day, are going to provide more opportunities for learning and development than any course. Like I say, I always give myself an example. I don't learn a lot from courses. Very similar to you, I would much rather spend an hour on a call with members of different teams, just listening, and I will learn, and engaging, and I will learn more from that than any workshop.
What do you then, if we go back to that pyramid, what would you say the learning strategies or learning types are most underused within, like, in general, and also within our industry that we work in?
The learning types, you mean like audio?
Yeah.
What are most underused? Yeah. Definitely the conversational piece, like the group environment. I think that's massively underused, because again, I think that what happens a lot in most companies, and I'll use compliance as an example of this, the majority, I have to be careful of my wording, but the majority of compliance professionals, when they're in a group environment, you normally have the same people that lead those conversations. You'll have head of compliance, VP of compliance, MLRO, safer gambling manager. They'll lead and they'll do all of the talking. Whereas the best conversations I've found, like we've been doing it recently, right? We have members within teams that we work with where we'll initiate the conversation and then we hand it over, and they're going back and forth. And we're sitting there just listening, learning. So are they, because like you said, they've got to know what they're talking about. So they've had to retain information. So for me, that is the most undervalued part but I think it's undervalued or underutilized because the wrong people in conversations talk too much and don't shut up. And that bugs me, which is why
a lot bugs you, don't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm getting old. I'm miserable. But because I think you see it in the conversations that we have. One of the things I always try to do is enable the team. So create platforms where they can speak, because I don't know half of what they know. They know a lot more than me. So I always try to enable them platforms. And I think companies just need to do that more. Just have more people shut up.
I think, and I totally agree. I think it's an easy, cost-effective, and time-saving way of learning. It's easy because there's not much that needs to go into creating a process for this learning environment. You say, okay, every second Tuesday of the month, there's a group discussion where somebody is the new chair, and they have to be the person that delivers the session to the team. Doesn't take much.
So conscious of time, how could, or what would you suggest a compliance department or a department within a business, what could they initiate tomorrow that would enhance the learning and development within their teams, their businesses? What could they do tomorrow?
Exactly what I just said. I think what I've seen work so well with little effort from myself, little bureaucracy, is like that this group discussion. Generally speaking, there's a need for development or training in a specific team. In that team, you create an environment where they go and discuss, they go and learn. Because what happens is, you will see the people delivering on what they want to learn. So, for example, that somebody knows that they don't really know about, I don't know, SG, they will end up actually delivering a session on SG because they need to learn for themselves. So they deliver something that's of benefit to them, and then again, that person is actually learning, and everyone's learning around that, and you're closing the gap of knowledge. You're closing the gap of knowledge gaps because that person actually ends up delivering on what they want to learn.
So then on the flip side, if there was one training type that you would bin tomorrow or advise companies to stop doing tomorrow, what would it be?
Ooh, what? Let me just have a look.
No, don't look in your book.
No, I'm just looking at what the options are. Yes, I would definitely bin lecture demonstration, so being spoken at. I'll definitely bin any content, any training, and this might just be about who's delivering the training maybe. So we will say, okay, this AML training needs to be delivered by the AML manager, but actually they might not be the best person to deliver the training. Might be better for somebody in the team to deliver the training. But I would definitely end all training that is literally presentation, PowerPoint presentation slides, and somebody speaking from the slides.
There's going to be universities closing down all over the UK tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
well, let's go and show
what about the people that learn from that type of thing? That they absorb the most information from a lecture-based environment.
Well, scientifically, statistically, this doesn't happen. So
okay.
So again, if you're playing it by rule of thumb, and just the general population and the statistics, it's not the best way to learn.
But then why are so many unis still lecture-based?
Well, if you look at the employment rate of people that come out of university, and actually how many of them end up going into employment in their dedicated field of let's say a master's or a bachelor of science, I think it must be. I mean, if you're taking out dedicated professions like solicitors, lawyers, and doctors, and you come outside of that, very few people end up in their areas of qualification because the learning hasn't been good enough. They haven't learned contextually. They've memorized a lot theoretically, potentially, but in terms of learning, I would argue I think that shows in itself.
I think it does, but universities haven't changed their format of teaching for the most part. It's still very, for many types of qualification and degree, it's very much lecture based still to this day.
Yeah, and that's why that's why you're getting more and more people not making use of the degrees that they get.
Okay, fair enough. I'm conscious of time.
Yeah.
So, are there any points before I give you my 2 closing questions?
I'm trying to see. No, I think that was good. I think it was just about really delving into learning. So there's nothing. I think we've gone through kind of and the difference between learning and remembering, what we think are effective strategies. So I've discussed myself. What effective strategies have you implemented? A question to you then.
Similar to you. I really love the group discussions. I really like. I'm always conscious of not taking too many people away from their working environment. That's one thing that's always in my mind. If I say, right, let's get 4 people in a call and let's discuss, whatever topic it is, I am always in the back of my mind thinking, right, I've got 4 people in this call for an hour. That's 4 hours of work that's not being done collaboratively. And that bugs me. I'm not going to say it bugs me again. That worries me. So I am always conscious of that, but I do think that the positives outweigh the negatives and that there's more achieved in that hour long term than what would have been achieved if those people were left doing their day jobs. So I do think that, the group discussions is number 1 for me. I love it. I get so much value from it. I get so many ideas. Selfishly, for me, it's really good, but I also find it beneficial for my teams. Like off the back of group discussions in the last few months, there have been several people that have ended up changing their roles and their career trajectory completely, because from being in group discussions, people in the room were able to see actually why is that person in that role when they should be doing this. They're clearly more passionate, more skilled. So it helps with their career development long term as well as in the short term. And I would, in terms of something that I would change, I would try and get companies to allocate more time. I know it's very difficult and most companies do a good job of it, I believe, but allocate more time and find ways of doing that. And it might mean that you need to invest in hiring more people so that more time can be allocated to training. It's a longer term investment, but I think more time needs to be given to it, because at the moment, if you weigh up, if you were to put all of your daily tasks or weekly tasks in a list and prioritize them, training would usually be at the bottom. And I think it's at the bottom because it's seen as an administrative task and time consuming, as opposed to a benefit
and developmental.
Yeah, and I think that needs to change within a company, but that comes in most companies. That comes culturally.
It's ironic actually, because we use the phrase training and development as if they're mutually exclusive, but actually training should lead to development, right?
Agreed.
So that's quite funny in and of itself. I just think one more thing is that more emphasis should be spent on really testing learning outcomes. So assessing learning outcomes whenever you're delivering a training or workshop or whatever it may be, there should be something that has a follow-up that actually is able to assess the learning outcomes, both for the people who have attended this session, but for also you as a trainee, the trainer, to know actually where you need to improve or amend or develop in yourself in terms of the content you're delivering.
I agree. Good place to wrap it up. Why are you looking at me? 2 final questions.
Yes, you said you're going to give me 2 final questions.
So my first question is, you know what I'm going to say. Tell me about a recent challenge or learning scenario that you've come up against.
Challenge. We haven't done it. We've put in a spot here. We haven't done this for a while actually. So recent challenge.
You struggled to get here on time today.
Yeah. Did I? I think it was.
I'm joking.
Recent challenge. That's a good one, because I don't want to say things are being.
That's good. If you haven't got one, I'll move on to the second.
I think in life there are always so again, recent challenge I've had, which again goes back to this retention piece, is getting my sons to take accountability for their own time management. So, for example, I have 2 sons, and they know each week that they have sports, football, basketball, whatever it may be. But every week, it's the same old adage that until dad or mum says time to get ready for the X, Y, Z, they're waiting. So I'm having that continuous challenge, other than school, having that challenge of actually how can I educate them? How can I get them to understand that it's important for them to take ownership of their own time? They know that they got football at 10 o'clock. Listen,
I think if you find the answer to that, every parent listening to this is gonna sign up.
There are some kids out there. I'm guaranteed there must be some children out who take account. But and again, they're getting older now, so they're not 7 years old, 8 years old. They are getting a bit older. You know, my older son's a teenager, and my younger son will be a teenager this year. So that's been a challenge of mine. That definitely has been a challenge.
I feel your pain. My kids are exactly the same.
But I think again that would not only help for teenagers, it would be helping all people who are just struggling with time management or taking accountability, ownership of things. So that's been a challenge of mine. So I'm working on that. And
then tell me about a recent success. Tell me about something that's gone well.
A recent success.
Or something that you've achieved, something that you're happy with, something you're proud of, something positive to end with.
A recent success. Again, I'm trying to think of something that I don't know. That's a hard one. A recent success. I look at every day as a success. Any day that I'm able to wake up and have a roof over my head and have a loving family, I look at it as a success. So it's hard for me to say like something specific.
I'll take that as an answer.
Yeah. I think that. A recent success actually. I would say I'll give you something actually. I did a panel. I did a panel at a conference recently. The panel went well. I didn't think it went as well as potentially the feedback, but I think it went well. I just didn't think it. I felt like I was almost preaching to converted. I felt like I was just regurgitating information and advice I'd given before. But anyway, long story short, after that, in the panel itself, the only questions were questions I would ask myself, which was nice. But after the panel, I had 2 people come up to me and said that was the best panel in that area. So there's like a section which is compliance related, and that was the best panel that had been delivered over the course of the whole conference, and they'd been in that every single panel because they were exhibiting in that area. So that was something that went well.
Yeah. Why didn't that come to you straight away? That's a massive
Because
success.
because again, like for me, I didn't feel I was delivering anything new. If that makes sense, I was kind of just delivering what I've kind of continuously trying to deliver to people that would listen. Anybody that would listen.
No, good. We'll wrap it there. That's a good positive to end with. Do you want to do the honors?
The outro. Again, guys, thank you for engaging with our content. Thank you for staying with us and listening to another episode of the Compliance Chronicles. We really appreciate it. We've moved past 2,000 followers now, which we again would never envisage subscribers, which we would never envisage getting to at this point in our journey. And it just goes to show that there was the appetite for people to kind of hear and collaborate in the way we think it's information or content can and should be shared. But we always ask to continue to like, comment and subscribe to help us again engage with more and more people just like yourselves. So thank you, and we will look forward to seeing you again on the next episode.
Thank you. Do you want me to do a quick?
Yeah, do a quick call to action.
The Compliance Chronicles continues to grow and reach new audiences. We're very thankful for the likes, comments, the new subscribers. We'd like to reach a wider audience, so please don't forget to share and continue following and turn on your notifications.
Perfect.
Nice and easy.
Done.
Done.